I'm going to do a third attempt at this video. I know I'm late. I know that when this gets posted, it'll be midnight on the East Coast. And I apologize in advance. The Buffalo Sabres, I go back and forth on this. Now, I've got the goat head jersey up behind me, and I'm wearing the ugly yellow one that I like. I don't know. I hated it when it came out, and I was like, oh my God, this jersey is just awful. But for some reason, when you own it, there's a feeling of owning ugly and just saying this is okay, and I'm okay with who I am as a person. The Buffalo Sabres record is an interesting one. They're a team with a plus 500 record, despite the fact that for the last 5 years they've been down. Despite the fact that for young hockey fans, you're not going to remember them as being a great team. I'm old enough to remember the 80s when in the early 80s they were a threat. I was not a hockey fan in the mid 70s because I was a baby and a toddler, and I wasn't as big into hockey. And if I was, I certainly wouldn't have been watching Buffalo Sabres games. But that's when they were a consistent threat. The Buffalo Sabres, in terms of their careers in the NHL as a franchise, 1975 they made it to the final and lost, and then they lost the final in 1999, of course, famously to Brett Hull with his fantastic shot. I can't. His foot was in the crease. And the funny part with that was that was when that was a rule. There's a rule you can't have your foot in the crease. Foot can't be in the crease. And it happened. Don Cherry always said, if the Stanley Cup's on the line and it's been awarded, they're not going to call it back for skate in the crease. And he was right. They didn't call it back for skate in the crease. And whether it's right or wrong, it's something that I'm sure Buffalo fans won't be happy that I mentioned. As a Dallas fan, I was okay with it. I was like, well, he didn't interfere with the play, and he didn't have any effect on that goal going in. I know that wasn't the nature of the rule, but that rule got changed pretty damn quick after that series was over. But Buffalo is an odd team because they have missed the playoffs 7 of the last 9 years. 7 of 11, 8 of 12, 9 of 13. So 10 of the last 14 seasons that have been played, they've missed the playoffs. So I can understand why, if you're 20 or younger, my respect for the Buffalo Sabres franchise might seem a little bit misplaced because they're considered to be the smallest market and an ugly city and poor franchise and everything that you could possibly say that would be negative. And I understand that. But as an older fan, I do remember when Buffalo was more relevant and they were always a threat. I remember the Adams division. My God, the fights in the Adams division. You had Boston, Buffalo, Hartford, Quebec. Boston, Buffalo, Hartford, Quebec, Montreal. And the hatred in that division from any of those teams to any of the other teams was so palpable in games. Now, I mean, everybody talked about the Norris and the Norris division and the rivalries there, and a lot of that to do with the fact that, there's a Toronto-centric NHL that exists. But man, that Adams division, that was just awesome. I miss that. I know when they went to the current playoff format, which some people don't like, it's like, oh, well, it's all the same teams all the time. That's the best hockey, man. The best hockey is when the two teams that are facing off in the playoffs really genuinely hate each other. And perhaps because some of the tougher, bigger goons from the olden days are out of hockey now, and there isn't really the big, tough goons to take over. You have to be able to skate and play hockey to be in the NHL. Some of that hatred has kind of gone out of the game, and it's become a little chippier. The chippiness isn't as high as Don Cherry would make you believe, though. It really isn't this freewheeling, everybody's winging their stick at each other's heads kind of game that he had predicted with dire consequences back in the mid-90s when they started talking about getting fighting out. But Buffalo has been a have team. And that was during free market days as well. I'm throwing that out there. It is hard for them to compete in the current NHL. They don't generate the same revenues as other teams, but there's hope. Ownership is good. The GM seems to have committed himself to improving the team in the long term at the potential expense of short term. And I have tremendous respect for what they're doing in Buffalo. And it's unusual too because, and I guess this is a video where I can sort of answer some critics. I've never meant to say that I don't like Buffalo or that I don't respect Buffalo. If I say tonight's game's a gimme because it's Buffalo, it's more because it's a young team. They're learning. They're still growing together. And if a veteran team, a big veteran team's against them, that big veteran team should beat them. On any given night, should beat them. But that being said, and hockey being hockey, there are different eras. There are eras where things go well, things go badly. I say that as a fan of a Canucks team that's done this, a Boston team that's done the same, and a Dallas team that's done the same. I'll get there. Give me a sec. Oddly enough, Scotty Bowman, the greatest coach in history, never won a cup in Buffalo. Always found that odd. And you know, I can hear people saying, well, he never had, you know, the great teams. He had some pretty good teams in Buffalo. He did. Yeah, there it is. Stars win Togol Cup. Few NHL rule changes created as much controversy as the initiative for zero tolerance in the goal crease, adopted in 1996-97. So this was the third year it was under NHL rule scrutiny. Under this strict enforcement, goals were disallowed if any player on the attacking team had any part of his skate or body in the crease. It was just horrible. You think it's bad now with instant replays. It was horrible. The crackdown was aimed at protecting goaltenders, a noble cause to be sure, but the repercussions were immediate and backlash swift. Too many goals were being disallowed because of a defending player having no impact on the goalie's ability to make the save, had even a part of his skate in the crease. The controversy reached new heights in the 97 playoffs when Chicago's Tony Amonte had a late goal waved off because he was in the crease before the puck. What had made the ruling so ludicrous? It was an empty netter. Nevertheless, the toe in the crease policy continued for the next 2 years. Only after a controversial season-ending goal did the league review its stance. In the 1999 Stanley Cup Finals, the President's Trophy-winning Dallas Stars faced the Buffalo Sabres. There was no weakness in the Dallas lineup. Damn straight. Forwards were led by Brett Hull, Mike Modano, and Joe Nieuwendyk. The defense was anchored by Captain Darian Hatcher. Ed Belfour was the dependable starting goalie. On the other bench, the Sabres' fortunes rested with two-time Hart Trophy winner Dominic Hasek in goal. No Buffalo player averaged a point a game during the regular season, but Hasek gave the team a chance to win on its own merit every night. Dallas carried a 3-2 series lead into Game 6 at Buffalo's Marine Midland Arena. In the defensive showdown, Belfour and Hasek were nearly flawless, allowing only one goal each after 60 minutes of play. The first two overtime periods were indecisive. That game was just torture to watch, man. And for a 1-1 tie going into the third overtime, it was really good hockey. Shockingly, a very good game. Less than 5 minutes into triple overtime, Hull, at the top of the Sabres crease, pounced on a rebound off a shot by Modano. As Hull, a right-handed shot, reached behind him for the puck, he parked his left skate in the crease. He easily flung the puck into the net to clinch the game for the Stanley Cup. To no avail, the Sabres vehemently protested. The league justified the goal by maintaining that Hull maintained possession throughout the entire play, overriding the crease violation. That's called bullshit. Sabres coach Lindy Ruff was expectedly dissatisfied. At the team's end-of-season rally in Buffalo, he ended the ceremonies with 2 words for Buffalo fans: no goal. The NHL eliminated the crease crackdown by the start of the next season. Buffalo's place in history. Not that unlike Vancouver. It's usually rooted in heartache and in being close. Oh, so close. And then it just sort of falls apart. The Buffalo Sabres, and again, this is one of those odd ones. You know, the stats are all there. You know, I can go through and look up stats for the players. Gilbert Perrault owns the stats book for the Buffalo Sabres. Played 1,191 games, scored 512 goals, 814 assists, 1,326 points, and never played anywhere else. Gilbert Perrault lived and died by the Buffalo Sabres, and he was the best player they ever had. Patty Lafontaine could have been if he played his whole career in Buffalo. Obviously didn't. Lafontaine was good. Andrew Chuck was probably the best pure goal scorer I ever saw in a Buffalo jersey. That includes McGillney. McGillney could be the best goal scorer if he felt like it. And when Buffalo picked up McGillney from Russia, it was a coup, man. Like, when he defected, that was the first young star who had come over from Russia. Russia had been, well, Soviets. They'd been okay with sending over the older guys like Larionov, Krutov, Makarov when they were older. But they were still keeping guys like Perrault and McGillney at home because these were the young star players. And for Buffalo, McGillney was the latest in a decent list of goal scorers. Danny Gare was another one who's a pretty good goal scorer. In recent history, Vanek has been a pretty good goal scorer. Back in the 70s, they had Rene Robert, Rick Martin, and aforementioned Perrault. Miroslav Shaitan was a decent goal scorer for them. I believe he had 40 a couple of times. Like, the offense out of Buffalo has usually been pretty good. The fact that during Hasek's era, when he took them to the Stanley Cup Final, they couldn't score. At least they didn't have the star players up front to score. They scored more by committee. It was all the more impressive what Hasek did. And in terms of record books, as much as Gilbert Perrault owns everything up front, Dominic Hasek is ahead in save percentage with a .926 career as Buffalo goaltender. He's ahead of Ryan Miller's .915 and Jonas Enroth's .910. Might surprise people to see Jonas Enroth third on that list. But again, it's going to be skewed because numbers in the 80s were bad compared to what they are now. Goals against average, Dominic Hasek 2.22. Marty Biron 2.53. Ryan Miller 2.60. Shutouts, Dominic Hasek dominates there with 55. Ryan Miller's next with 28. Like, it's not even close. It is an interesting time for the Sabres in that Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, Rasmus Ristolainen, there's a good core being built there. And though they've won 2 in a row at the time that I'm taping this, I still feel they're probably short of what they need to make the playoffs. And if they were to, say, win this year's draft lottery and pick up a Nolan Patrick or a Tommy Liljegren, and I don't know that Nolan Patrick's going to be the number one this year. I have a funny feeling that Liljegren will pass him by the end of the year, only because there's some doubt about whether or not Nolan Patrick's going to be a first-line center. And if you can't get a first-line center, you get a top 2 defenseman. And from all accounts, Liljegren projects to be a top 2 defenseman. So, and in Buffalo's case, it would be a really natural fit because they need more help on the blue line than what they have right now. The Sabres are a team that I respected in the 70s, a team I've respected in the 80s, and they're a team that I will continue to respect even as I always hear about how the city's too small, it's garbage. There was a lot of speculation about moving the Sabres not that long ago due to the attendance, due to just money issues in general, or, arenas ownership. Everything was going wrong with Buffalo. I do have sincere hope they turn it around because they're not an original 6 team, but we're to the stage where almost 50 years in any city, you count as being a part of that league's history on another level. I know that for this first 6 expansion teams this year, it has to feel pretty special that they've hit 50. And Buffalo and Vancouver aren't far off. And then, of course, the Islanders will follow suit. The Islanders being, of course, something I'll cover in a while here. But for now, this is Buffalo. It's hard to get into season-to-season records with them. And, the thing is, when you look at their records, there are some good records in here. They're 113 points. They had it in 74-75. They had it in 2006, 2007. 74-75 was a bigger deal, even though 2006, 2007, they did win the President's Trophy. That 113 points in 74-75 was harder to get. They play 2 less games, and there's no loser points. So it is harder for them to get those points. Their most wins was 53 in 2006, 2007. Their most goals was in 74-75 when they scored 354. That's at the height of Gilbert Perrault driving the offense. Their longest winning streak was, well, they've had it twice. They've had 10-game winning streaks. Overall, from January 4th to 23rd, 1984, and from October 4th to 26th in 2006. So that's not bad. Most seasons, Gilbert Perrault, games, Gilbert Perrault, goals, assists, it's all Gilbert Perrault. Most penalty minutes, Rob Ray, 3,189. So if you're watching a Buffalo broadcast and you're like, man, that guy between the benches, he's driving me nuts. He's been punched in the face a lot. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. He's really taken a lot of punches to the face. Like, he's given a lot of punches to the face, but he's taken a lot of punches to the face. A lot. Most points in a season, Pat LaFontaine still has that record with 148. Nobody's touching that. If not for injury, LaFontaine, who knows where he'd be on their lists? Who knows where he'd be in terms of consideration for one of the greatest players ever? LaFontaine had tremendous offensive talent. Most penalty minutes in a season, Rob Ray with 354 in 91-92. That was at a time, though, when penalty minutes were a lot higher, too. They always adjust down points. I think adjusting down penalty minutes might be a good idea, too, because it wasn't just points that were up in the 80s. It was not unusual to see a guy get 300, 350 penalty minutes. Most shutouts in a season, Hasek with 13. That was one of the 2 years that he had the Hart Trophy as well as the Vezina. He won the Hart back-to-back, the only goalie who has or likely ever will do that. The only one who would threaten that would be Carey Price. And I really can't see him doing it either. Not in today's NHL. I can't see a goalie winning back-to-back Hart trophies. Most goals in the season, Alex McGillney with 76. Nobody's ever going to challenge that either. Consecutive game streak, Craig Ramsey, who's played over 1,000 games in a Buffalo jersey. He had 776 games in a row, which extended from March 27th of 73 to February 10th, 83. So, well, let's put this in perspective. He didn't miss a game from when I was a month old until my 10th birthday. That's how long it took for him to miss a game. So that's pretty impressive stuff. Most points in a game, Gilbert Perrault with 7. He had the most assists in a game with 5. Most goals in a game, though, is Dave Andreychuk with 5. Andreychuk, fantastic goal scorer. Most points in a rookie season, Rick Martin still has that mark with 74. I'm sure there would have been people who before Jack Eichel's rookie season might have said, oh, maybe he'll threaten that. But in today's NHL, for a rookie to get 74 points is extremely difficult. I even look at Austin Matthews as what he's doing in Toronto right now, and I just don't know if he can keep that kind of pace up. But yeah, Buffalo is a team that I respect. I don't cheer for them, but I don't cheer against them either. When they played Dallas in the finals, I didn't hate Buffalo. I very often hate a team that's against my team, but I didn't hate Buffalo. I didn't have a reason to. And I didn't hate Hasek either. I respected his game. I wasn't a Hasek fan, but I respected his game. And I respected the fact that he made the most unorthodox, crazy saves. The only other goalie who would get close would be Boston's Tim Thomas. But it took a lot longer for Thomas to get into the spotlight, and he was there for a much shorter period of time than Hasek. I would still rate Patrick Roy as the best goalie I've ever seen, but Hasek's a close second. When I really think about it, and there's no bias in there, yeah, Hasek's second. He was just fantastic, and he was very consistent. So, if you're a Buffalo fan right now, there's definitely a good reason to feel optimistic that things are going to get better and that the rebuild is being done right this time. And I believe that it's going to turn around for Buffalo as soon as, I think, next year. This isn't the year, but next year. Anyways, that's my rundown on the history of Buffalo. This is a little different than the other ones I've done, just because with Arizona I had the move. With the Ducks, you have the fact they came in with Disney, and with Boston, you have 90 plus years of history and some Stanley Cup stuff to talk about, and the greatest defenseman in history. Buffalo has been sort of middle of the road, and most of their existence they've been a little above middle of the road, but they need that cup. Buffalo needs a Stanley Cup victory. And from their expansion brethren in Vancouver, they won't get any sympathy, but they'll get empathy because Vancouver's in the same position. The only difference is Buffalo's been to the final twice and lost, and Vancouver's been to the final 3 times and lost. So it's close, but no cigar. Alrighty, I will be back with more video chat and stuff tomorrow. It is right near my bedtime tonight. I'm watching Washington and Calgary right now. Getting ready to apologize to Calgary fans because Washington's beating them. But hey, these things happen. Anyways, any thoughts on the Buffalo Sabres? Make sure they're known in the comments. If you're just coming through, just browsing around, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And if you do so, welcome. Subscriber counts are starting to go up again. Very encouraging. And any feedback is welcome. And I'll talk to y'all again tomorrow.